Good evening and welcome everybody to Rich Politics. It's Sunday Night Live. We're probably going to do this a few more times. I'm enjoying doing it live. Your feedback is phenomenal. Thank you for all your support as well, for those supporting the campaign for us to get studio equipment, by the way. We're nearly there. The £500 target mark is almost reached thanks to you and your generosity, so we can keep bringing these broadcasts to you. A non-politically correct weekly broadcast with me, your host, Richard Taylor. Well, we're going to discuss a lot tonight. You may have seen the breaking news this week here in Wales that members of the Senedd, that's the Welsh Parliament, were caught out drinking down in Cardiff Bay. Two of them, Paul Davies and Darren Millar. Paul Davies, being the leader of the Welsh Conservative Party, has now resigned as the leader, and Darren Millar has resigned from the front bench. But they keep their seats, of course, and they'll still be playing an active part in the Senedd. And to bring it up to date, Andrew R.T. Davies is now the leader of the Welsh Conservatives down in Cardiff Bay. Well, to discuss that and so much more is my good friend and guest, Cei Dewar. Good evening, Cei.
Richard, good to be with you. Hope you're well.
Yes, I am extremely well. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Well, we got a lot to get through, Bish, tonight. And we got people coming online now on YouTube and on Facebook, and people are sharing the broadcast, which is exciting. First of all, let's start from the top, shall we? What a week it has been in Welsh politics. For those of us who are in Wales, of course, we know what goes on. But for a lot of people outside of the bubble, they don't really appreciate what's happening. Give us a roundup, Bish, of what's happened this week down at the Welsh Parliament.
Well, Rich, before we start, I'm going to say this week has gone down in my diary as Wales, Washington, and the WHO. What a week it's been in politics around the world. But yeah. Wales, well, what can I say? Yet again, Welsh Conservatives caught in another scandal. It wasn't that long ago that we had Sexgate with Stephen Crabb, the former Welsh Secretary of State. It cost him his position. And now we have three members of the Welsh Conservatives and one member of Welsh Labour, he whose name I dare not mention, just because I don't like him. Caught out.
Well, I'm going to mention him. Arlene Davies of Blaenau Gwent. That's who you're on about. That's right. The member of Senedd for Blaenau Gwent. Of course, he's been suspended by the Labour group, actually, but not from the party. So he keeps his seat. And, you know, social media has been very much alive with criticism of him, of course, because of what's happened down there. Because it's not so much what they did, Bish. You know, having a few beers with your mates. Look, none of us are going to condemn people. We're not looking through our curtains, reporting our neighbours, right? We're not. I'm not like that. I'm not a fan of lockdowns. People know I've been against it for a whole number of reasons, because there's data to prove that it does work and it doesn't work. So it's a matter of opinion. But my issue was this. My issue was really to do with the fact that these were the lawmakers becoming the lawbreakers. That is the level of hypocrisy, when you've got politicians telling members of the public, don't do this, don't do that, shutting pubs, banning the sale of alcohol, then having the audacity, however you want to spin the story, they were down in the Senedd, the place where we elect these politicians, we trust them on a boozer. That is, I know it's a headline grabber, but the truth is that's what they were doing. And they tried, well, they couldn't. They apologized. This is what gets me. I wonder what our viewers think. They apologized, they resigned, but admitted doing no wrong. I find that very unusual. Do you?
Well, this is the problem with politicians in the world that we now live in. Let's be honest, right? Public trust in politicians is probably at an all-time historical low. I don't think that the public perception of politicians, what they do, who they are, how they behave, could get any lower than it is right now, unless your name was Tony Blair and we're looking at another illegal war in Iraq. But the simple fact of the matter is, for many, many years, politicians have believed that they are above the laws that they make. And this, to me, has been just further proof. When Wales is going through what is now globally recognized as possibly the worst handling of the COVID-19 pandemic around the world, when we have statistics that countries that didn't even know we existed before this pandemic, and they were referencing in their weekly news, talking about the disastrous handling of COVID-19, the pandemic, the state of the Welsh NHS and everything else that's going on. Here we have politicians enjoying, and this is my argument where I'm really knocked off about what's happened, enjoying things that nobody else in Wales can do, and doing it at the taxpayer's expense whilst they're on a full salary. Because let's not forget, not a single politician in Wales has lost a single day's earnings whilst we've been going through this pandemic, when I know where I live in Pembrokeshire, businesses that are going bust left, right, and centre, companies here that applied for financial support at the start of this pandemic didn't see any money coming out of the Welsh government, out of the Senedd for 16 plus weeks. Families struggling to put food on their tables now because the money they're getting doesn't cover their bills, never mind doing what they are. Parents up to their breaking point, trying to educate kids whilst teachers, and I've got nothing against teachers, but they're not furloughed and only getting 60 or 80% of their salary. And here we have 4 likely lads in the bar after lockdown, when the pub industry in Wales is on its last knees, having a good old swig.
Yeah.
You and I are paying for it. So
well, I was going to say, because 3 of them have been named, of course. 3 of them have been named: Paul Davies, Darren Miller, and Arlene Davies. Now, it's interesting to note that the report's coming out. We've got to wait for the Independent Standards Commission. Now, the head of that is a guy called Douglas Bain. Now, I've emailed him, for all of you to know. I've emailed them and asked them for full disclosure, because members of the public should have the details of everything that happened, because we have a right, because they are elected officials, and they should come under scrutiny from the people who voted for them in the first place. Now, there's a question to be asked whether or not they should stand for elections in May, because although they've resigned from certain capacities and offices, Arlene Davies obviously can't, because he is not a member. He did, however, he was sacked from being a minister back in 2014, I believe it was, by Carwyn Jones, the then First Minister. It's interesting you mentioned something there, that they were drinking on taxpayers' money. Well, they were, because apparently it was a free bar. Well, there's no such thing as free. So actually the drinks that were provided was paid for, get this, folks, let me speak to you, by your tax. Politicians drinking at your expense. And that is why there is such public outrage and anger. And I know that the BBC here in Wales and ITV Wales won't give it as much scrutiny as I'm prepared to do, because I got nothing to lose. They don't pay my wage, and I'm not mainstream media, so I can say what I want. And I think it's an absolute shambolic disgrace the politicians have done this. And they got the cheek and audacity, especially Arlene Davies, I can say it, who called me a joke and a fake. That's right. Somebody.
That aged well, didn't it?
Well, it did age very well, yeah, because 13 days later, he got caught out. Well, it's interesting. Karma's until it gets you in the end. So, yeah, so the issue is, Bish, so over these, Kai, call it Bish because that's your title. I wonder what our viewers actually think. You got Carl Booth on here saying, Rich, I love your passion in Welsh politics. For anyone in the Welsh Assembly, put half the effort into Wales, you would be a damn better player. Well, I don't know about that. Well, I'll sort a few things out, that's for sure. But certainly, thank you very much for that, Carl. I really appreciate it. Maladin's on, Nigel's on from Pembrokeshire as well. What should these politicians do, Kai, in your opinion?
Plain and simple, resign. You've lost public trust. Look, I understand politicians do things that other people don't do. I understand they try and get away with things that other people wouldn't necessarily get away with because of their position, because of the job that they do. I also understand that being a politician, or let's say not being a politician, because anybody involved in politics is a politician, being an elected official is not an easy job, and they're financially compensated for it. The fact of the matter is, these people voted for, not necessarily the Conservatives, because they were opposed to a lot of the lockdown measures, but certainly Arlene Davies. This is a person that voted for the restrictions you and I are now facing, that we're living under. I can't see my family because of what he voted in place. I can't go and bring friends to my house. I can't go to my local pub and have a meal, never mind have a drink. So he's broken the very rules that he voted into place. He's already been caught for breaching the ministerial code of conduct with what he tried to do in 2014. The man has got a set of brass cojones the size of a bull, as far as I'm concerned, because right then he should have been deselected from the Labour Party and he should have resigned. He hasn't. So I don't think anything new is going to happen with this. Arlene Davies might get ejected from the Labour Party in the Senedd, because from what I understand, there's not a lot of people actually in the Labour Party that like Mr. Davies. But you have completely lost the public trust. You have destroyed any faith, any credibility. We've had years of listening to his xenophobic rants about other members. We've had years of him saying whatever he wants, attacking people.
Well, Bish, can I just say this before our viewers here? This is the Arlene Davies who actually went against the constituency. 62% of us in Blaenau Gwent voted to leave the European Union. Yep. And he Smith, the other Labour MP, went against it. So he's got some track record on this. And of course, we're seeing more and more of this stuff coming out. Let me just show our viewers the clip in case you missed it on the BBC reporting on this incident.
Good evening. Downing Street has waded into the row over politicians.
Right, we're having some technical issues with that, so we'll forget that, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for that. I'm having some technical issues, which is standard. When you're doing a live stream, hey, listen, it's live. Anything can happen, and it probably will. But basically, the report stated that they allegedly had broken COVID regulations, or they may have, was the conclusion of the report, which we're yet to see. Of course, there have been CCTV cameras down there. It's in a very secure environment, be it in the Welsh Parliament or T How, wherever it may have been. And of course, the public have the right to see this. We're coming up to elections in May. Why do we want to, elect a politician that's prepared to tell the people, stay at home, shut the pub, stop selling alcohol, take a sledgehammer to the hospitality industry, and then have the audacity to do this? It's just a smack and finger up to people in the public, innit? That's what it is, really, Kai, innit?
Do you know what bothers me more about this? Not even the fact that they've got caught. What bothers me is the fact that it is glaringly obvious to anybody that's even got a modicum of intelligence that they must have broken the COVID restrictions to be in that place and be drinking. What's bothered me is South Wales police refusing to investigate, when if it had been any ordinary member of the public, they would have fined them up the wazoo. And referring the matter to the local council to look at the licensee. This is what politicians do well. They get caught in a tricky situation and throw the first available person under the bus to take the blame rather than deal with it themselves. The fact that Mr. Davis and Mr. Miller, because I'm trying to be respectful, have resigned their position as leader and chief whip tells me you know full well you damn guilty of what you've been caught doing. And what's even worse is 48 hours after the story broke, it comes out not only were they involved in this, they went back the next night and did exactly the same.
Yeah, so well, I think that was the nail in the coffin for them, really, to put it bluntly. I mean, of course, I contacted South Wales Police. Actually, I messaged them on Twitter for our viewers. If you didn't know, you can follow us on Twitter, RW Taylors or Rich Politics. And I asked them a simple question. I said, will this incident be referred to you? Because if it's a breaching COVID regulations, with all the fines that members of the public have been getting for going for a walk in the bloody park or just going for a stroll somewhere and being told this is illegal, fines for stupid things. And yet, I referred this to, and they answered me back. In fairness to the South Wales Police, they answered me back and said, no, this is a matter for Cardiff City Council and the licensee or the person that sold the alcohol. So basically, it's like this, folks. If I walked into a pub on lockdown and the landlord sold me beer, I am not breaking the law. The landlord is. But surely, this is the point, isn't it? There's a moral issue here. I have gone into a pub and purchased alcohol or got alcohol. Politicians knew exactly what they were doing down in Cardiff Bay on that night, don't they, Kai?
Well, the grey area of it is, if South Wales Police want to argue that it's a matter for the licensee, yeah, that's to do with the sale of alcohol. But the proximity of people and the public gathering of people, which is what this constitutes, these are two areas that fall under the powers the police have been given under this legislation. If they were within 2 meters of each other, which it's undoubtedly they were, because I've never been able to chink glasses from 6 feet away with somebody else. If they were within 2 meters of each other, that is a breach of the COVID regulations. The fact that 3 of them from 3 different households were in a public place or at a public gathering together, that's a breach of the COVID restrictions. That is not a local council issue. Those are under emergency measures that an emergency restrictions that they put in place for this pandemic. Those are criminal offenses and should be dealt with a criminal charge. Now, whether the result of that is further legal action or a fine, depending on the stature and status of the person and the severity of the offense committed, is irrelevant. The fact is, what we have now is the police fining people for having a cup of coffee on a park bench, because that constitutes a picnic, and a clear breach of the rules takes place, but but South Wales Police refusing to investigate it, and I can only think it's because they're politicians, not ordinary members of the public. Incidentally, on that note, this shows you how effective the police are at knowing what it is, because I was reading this afternoon, so far in the last few weeks, of 44 major fines that have been handed out under the new emergency powers to do with the COVID restrictions being breached, all 44 have been overturned, because the police are now dishing out fines for crimes that are not covered under the COVID restrictions for a breach of COVID restrictions. The problem with all of this is, for us as the public to understand, we don't know what's law, what's not law, because the Welsh Assembly have changed the law concerning the COVID restrictions every 3.5 days since last March. So how on earth we can stay up to date with it, how the police can stay on top of it, is irrelevant. But this goes beyond that. This is a glaringly, blatantly obvious breach of the lockdown measures, when the entire nation of Wales is suffering because of what these men voted to enact to put us under. And that is why I think resigning from your position as leader of the Welsh Conservatives, of Chief Whip, is not enough. You should stand down. You have broken public trust, and you, by your own actions to me, have made your position as an elected representative untenable, because you do not represent the people that elected you to where you are. And,
you've brought the Welsh government, or at least the Senate, the Parliament you represent, as a politician into disrepute. And let's be honest, and you've lost trust with the public. So how can they remain in office or even stand in the elections coming now in May if they're not postponed? Well, moving this slightly on, Bishop, of course, the Welsh Conservatives moved very, very swiftly in appointing and their coronation of their new leader, which is Andrew R.T. Davies, someone I think is a good guy. I think he'd be good as a leader. He's done it before. So I wonder what your thoughts are about that. You know, it was really swift. Members, of course, of the party, I don't think were consulted. It was done internally. Glyn Davies being the chairman of the Welsh Conservatives here, working with those already in the Senedd. So it was an internal kind of nomination, really, wasn't it? And he was then elected. And it was announced today, I believe, on social media.
Yeah, this morning. I think the grey area that most people don't understand is Paul Davies was not the leader of the Welsh Conservatives. He was simply the leader of the Welsh Conservatives in the Senedd. So there isn't a need for a leadership challenge. There isn't a need for a leadership race like we saw when Boris Johnson was elected as leader of the Conservatives and became Prime Minister. This is a vote that can be carried out amongst the members of the Senedd in the group. Yesterday, it became very aware that there would be a very swift coronation, that it was highly likely Andrew R.T. Davies would take the throne again. Is it changing the old guard for the old guard? Do I think he'll bring anything new? Probably not. It just, like all politics, seems more of the same. And maybe he'll prove me wrong. I doubt it. It doesn't seem, from what I've been watching with RT over the last few weeks, it doesn't seem like he's going to bring anything new to the table. It really does to me sound like it's going to be more of the same. Whether that works for the Conservatives, I personally speaking, I think, because I live in Pembrokeshire, and both of our elected officials, both being Conservatives, have both been caught in scandals within the current election cycle for the respective bodies that they're elected to. I don't see how I didn't see how Stephen Crabb was going to survive. The only thing that got him through the door was, of course, the Brexit election, with the general election last year, and the state that the country was in, and just wanted to get on and get Brexit done. I don't see how Paul Davies could possibly stand, although I'm hearing from people I know in the Tory party down here that they're not going to deselect him. They're perfectly happy for him to carry on. So I think, for me, if he is still in the group, if Darren Miller's still in the group, I really think that we're just seeing the absolute disdain that politicians, even with Alan Davies, I know it doesn't affect me because he's blind-eyed Gwent, but it just shows me the absolute disdain that politicians have for the general public, and how far removed and out of touch they are with the people that they represent. Any time that this happened, it would be bad. With what Wales is going through right now, this is beyond horrendous to me. And there's very few people that come away with this with any modicum of credibility.
Yeah. Well, do you know, I think this is going to have a profound impact upon the Conservative Party's chances here in the elections here in Wales. As many of you know, my viewers as well, and people who follow me, I am a member of the Abolish Welsh Assembly Party, and we're receiving applicants now to stand as candidates. As of today, actually, we launched it. And I think there's going to be a real challenge for that vote, because there's a lot of devo-skeptic people out there who do not believe, like myself, that devolution has been good for the people of Wales. I had an argument with somebody yesterday online. I asked them the simple question, what has devolution done for us? And he told me free prescription and plastic bags. And I'm like, great, 20 plus years for that. Cheers, mate. Fantastic. What an achievement. Great. And free bus passes. Amazing. Actually, they're not free prescriptions because the taxpayer has to pay for them. But anyway, the idea now for me running up to these elections, this is my thoughts on it, there's going to be a real fight for that devo-skeptic vote, isn't there? We got some Welsh Conservatives, in fact, about over 60%, I believe it is, who would get rid of, abolish the Assembly. Obviously, they're stuck with the Conservative Party, who have said on record, because Glyn Davis did this morning on Politics Wales Live with James Williams, he stated that the Conservative Party here in Wales support and believe in devolution. So he set out his stall. And for me, that's going to cause a great challenge for the Welsh Conservatives. Now, we have people from the Labour Party and many other parties who have said to me, Rich, we don't believe that this is working. We want to vote and support the Abolish Welsh Assembly Party. So there's something drastic that needs to happen because they were talking about a devolution reformation under Paul Davis's tenureship and leadership. Well, what's happened to that now? Where's that gone? It's gone out the window because he's lost all credibility. So now, the electorate is faced with that decision. Do we want the same as we've always had, which is Welsh Labour, the one-party state, or do we want to get rid of it altogether? Or the other question, which always pops up, is Welsh independence, which, by the way, is not polling any higher than abolishing the Welsh Assembly, which is crazy when you consider they have these cultish movements that I call Yes Cymru, and of course they are a pressure group, and they love to slate me online. I don't mind. I just hit the block button all the time. Bye, ciao for now. But ultimately, there is a real growing sense that people are fed up. And I'll say this, I think the turnout in these elections, even with COVID, whether it's done by postal or online, or whatever the case might be, is going to be a lot higher. Because people are more engaged now with politics here in Wales than they were before, because of the cock-ups Mark Drakeford and Vaughan Gething has made.
Well, I think the Tories had a real chance at swinging control of the Senate in their direction with this, looking at the polling figures coming into this and the way that Welsh Labour under Vaughan Gething and Mark Drakeford have handled the pandemic. I really thought that the Tories might be credibly able to challenge, or at best form a coalition government that would unseat Labour as the controlling party in the Senate. I think that has just gone down the pan. I really do. I think we will see a shift in the political spectrum and the makeup of the Senate. But I still think now, unfortunately, the Tories have handed Labour the opportunity to come out of this with needing maybe 1 or 2 seats to maintain their grip on power. What I'm hoping is that I'm wrong. I'm hoping that as jaded as this may sound, I'm really hoping that Labour continue to make the cock-ups that they're making in how they're managing this pandemic, and that we see a complete rise of the unexpected in Welsh politics and the parties, and that the smaller parties, the fringe parties as the media, become the deciding factor. I think that somebody like Abolish the Welsh Assembly, or let me not pick one so that everybody else gets upset, but the Reform Party, or certainly not Plaid Cymru or the Liberal Democrats. But
are you suggesting Plaid Cymru are a fringe party? That's music to my ears, that is.
To me, Plaid Cymru have always been a fringe party. You've only got to look at the support that they have as a national party.
Well, I think you remember in the campaign you're in Blaenau Gwent, I think the guy took about just over 1,000 votes, just about got
they
the
were
deposit
lucky to get the deposit back.
Yeah. So, and yet they're making Blaenau Gwent a target seat when, they're pushing the whole idea of a Welsh language. Most of my friends in Blaenau Gwent that I know don't even speak Welsh. In fact, 13% of the Welsh population speak Welsh. I love the language, but don't get me wrong, it's not going to win you an election, is it? Let's be honest. Bish, I just want to move this on because of our time. We've got so much to talk about. We want to talk about Biden and Trump. We're going to talk about that. So make make sure, folks, you share this broadcast. It's going to be interactive and interesting. You can put your comments on there as well. And then we're going to talk the last section of this episode tonight. We're going to talk about lockdowns. Yes, bloody lockdowns are doing my head in. I don't know about you, but just a reminder this week that both Darren Millar and Paul Davis have both resigned from the Tory front bench after they were boozing up down the Parliament. And of course, Arlene Davis has been silent on the issue, only retweeting stuff without posting anything because he's getting slaughtered on social media.
Before you move on, let me just say this. This is probably the quietest I've ever seen Arlene Davis in the entire time.
Yeah, well, you know, I say karma's a beep in it, and it comes back to bite you in the ass, and that's just the way it is, folks. You know, and so I just want to move on to the Welsh elections. Do you think that there's a real possibility that Abolish Welsh Assembly Party will gain seats?
Yes, I think that anybody that comes forward now picks up the right rhetoric and is tapped into the public opinion, and that's this is the key. Is anybody that wants to have any success now, talking as a political strategist, in the Welsh Assembly elections, whether it's May or November or whenever they're planning on moving it to, because it's blatantly obvious now that they're going to move it. If they tap into the public mood and understand what the public wants, which is what politicians don't. They just don't understand what the public wants. We've seen that for the last 5 years down in Cardiff Bay. I think that a party like Abolish the Welsh Assembly Party could come out of this with 4, maybe 5 seats in the Assembly. And if it comes down to either party needing a coalition, not that Labour would go into a coalition with Abolish, but if it was the Tories, for example, that like Theresa May had the ability with the DUP, a smaller party like this can become the deciding factor in a coalition government for how the direction of the Senate is going to go and delivering on that referendum.
Well, RT Davis, if you're watching, you know where we are. Give us a call. That's all I'm going to say about that. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting election, of course, where they've talked about delaying it because of the pandemic, and they've passed some legislation allowing them to do that actually this week in the Senedd, in the Welsh Parliament. So it'll be interesting to see what actually happens. I'm a firm believer that, you know, even those pushing for Welsh independence, a pipe dream though it is, and there are some people who are very colourful characters that promoted on social media. They're very much into it. And I've always said, look, if Welsh independence was good for Wales, I'd be the biggest advocate. I would be preaching it. I would be promoting it. But it doesn't work. It won't work because of a number of reasons I'm not going to go into on the show tonight. But look, let's have a referendum. Let's have a referendum with Abolish on the ballot paper and independence. And let the people of Wales decide, not politicians, the people of Wales. Well, we're going to move on anyway. Enough of Welsh politics. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. Don't forget to share the Facebook broadcast and on YouTube. Welcome to all my subscribers as well. Thank you so much. It means a lot that you do. I really, really appreciate it. Well, we have seen a big change in America, of course. We've seen the handover of power eventually when Trump decided to give in. After he still hasn't conceded, or he has still not accepted the fact he's lost because he doesn't believe he did. And some of our viewers don't believe he did, you know, stop the steal and all that. And we've seen some dramatic scenes in America, things that, you know, in Welsh politics, it really makes us look minute compared to what's going on over there. So I'm just going to play this clip from Global News. I'm referencing them in case I get taken down for it. But here it is on Biden's appointment as the 46th president of the United States of America.
Well, now that Joe Biden has been sworn in as president, we're all looking ahead to what's next. Let's bring in Daniel Lippman now. Daniel is a White House and Washington reporter for Politico. Daniel, what do Biden's first few days in office look like? Are there items already on the agenda?
Yeah, so in the next few hours, he's going to sign 17 executive actions that are going to be taking effect pretty much immediately, and in some cases in a few weeks, aimed at having the U.S. rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, reversing the Muslim travel ban, doing other steps in terms of encouraging mask use. So in every federal building, you'll have to wear a mask, and other actions aimed at reversing Trump administration policies.
There you go, Kai. So, of course, I think how many executive orders did Trump sign when he first came into office?
Okay, to put it in perspective, Trump signed 4 executive orders in his first 7 days in office. Obama signed 8, Bush signed 2, Clinton signed 2, Joe Biden signed 17 within 6 hours of being elected, of being inaugurated as president of the United States. And that's the first day on the job. He's signed multiple since then. But to give you an idea, okay, in his inauguration speech, he made this wonderful claim that he wants to invoke this elusive property in rebuilding and healing the soul of America. And that thing is unity. These were Joe Biden's words. And I have the entire transcript of his inauguration speech. You know, I do news for the Onyx News Network in the United States, so a lot of my political and news commentary is on politics and what's happening both in the US and around the world. But this is what Joe Biden did. Okay, first day on the job in his America, the unified America. He killed 70,000+ jobs at a time when they need more jobs than you can imagine. He completely eliminated women-only sports by empowering transgender people to men. Transgender men can now compete in female sports. So female sports in America are gone because we don't see it going the other way. He's reinvaded Syria. They left 5,000 National Guard troops to freeze in a parking garage with 1 toilet and 2 power sockets. He admitted after attacking Trump for not having a COVID relief plan for the vaccine, then admitted that they don't have a plan to fight COVID. He broke his own mask mandate within 3 hours, and he destroyed America's energy independence, making them once again truly reliant on OPEC and possibly Chinese oil. So that is what my as a good friend of mine calls him, that's what Beijing Biden has done for America in his first day in office. And that really goes to, oh, and there was one other thing. He removed all of Donald Trump's protections for abortion laws. So he instantly alienated 75 million voters in North America. That is Biden's ticket to unity.
And I watched the news report just today, actually, that when he moved into the Oval Office, obviously they've had a refurbishment. You know, the color of the carpet has changed, and they've taken out the bust of Winston Churchill out and replaced it with a whole number of different people. It was very interesting to see the first few days of any president indicate the tone of what he is actually setting out. And of course, some of the things he's already signed back up to the Paris Agreement, which was to do with a greener economy and all that kind of stuff, and being carbon neutral. He is WHO, all of these organizations, this global kind of player. I think Biden is good for those who like him, and for those of us who don't share that view, we can see where this is going. And maybe
let me stop you on that, because something you just said, when you look at all of the executive actions he's taken, people that I know in America tell me that the cost of jobs in canceling the Keystone Pipeline. Now, bearing in mind, this was a union.
Explain to our viewers that pipeline, Bish, so they know.
So the Keystone Pipeline is an oil pipeline that runs through federal land from Canada down into North America. I think it's Wyoming is the state. I can't remember offhand. That benefits from it. People I know that work there have told me the actual cost of jobs of the cancellation of this, just in North America, never mind the effect it has on Canada as well, because Justin Trudeau has come out and said that he's very very disheartened by the news of the cancellation of the Keystone Pipeline. This in North America is going to cost 83,000+ jobs. That's just in one executive action. So when you say that you want to promote a message of unity, when you immediately take actions, and bear this in mind, they've shut down Congress. The Senate and the House of Representatives have been sent home for a week. Biden is now basically ruling America by decree, by executive order. And everything that they're doing at the moment, these first 17 in the first few hours of being president, there's not a consideration of what's in the best interest of America. It is literally looking like I am going to reverse everything that Trump did. Whether you like Donald Trump or you don't like Donald Trump, the simple fact of the matter is you cannot lay out a message of unity, of unification, if you don't deal with two major things. One, don't try and undo everything the previous president did, because as much as there was animosity and acrimony between Trump and Obama, Trump didn't go in to the White House and then set about trying to undo everything Obama did. He let Congress and the Senate and the House of Representatives take their natural course. He didn't do everything by executive order. But likewise, don't then embark on a course of events that is devastating to your own country and really is going against the people that supported you to put you in that place to where you're now appointed. I was going to say something.
Yeah. I read something this week that apparently Trump is the only US president that's never taken us to war. And of course, immediately we've seen Biden now sending troops in. Is it to Syria? All of a sudden, an executive order. I just wonder, for all of our viewers who are watching on YouTube and on Facebook, don't forget, share the broadcast. I'd appreciate it. This Welshman ranting about all things politics. But more importantly, have you got any questions? Any thoughts on Biden and Trump? Do you love Biden? Do you love Trump? Do you hate both of them? Don't you care? Let us know. Send the comments in, and I'll post them. And what's your question, Bish?
My question is this: if you're elected by the people, why do you need 25,000 National Guard troops to protect you from them?
Yeah, that was very interesting, wasn't it? Tell us a bit of that news report. You mentioned it to me this week, didn't you? Yeah. That he had so many thousands of security, didn't he, or something? Tell us a little bit about that, Bish.
So, Washington, D.C. was basically on a shutdown. You know, they've stopped almost every vehicle moving around certain parts. Yes, I understand with what they call an insurrection. If that was an insurrection, I'm a Chinaman, because that would
what's your name? Wuhan.
Yeah, that would go down as the worst insurrection in human history. For a start, an insurrection requires massive amounts of firearms, which were absent, and it requires a lot of violent protests, which I didn't see much of that inside the Senate. All right, I'm not saying they should have been in the congressional building, but the simple fact of the matter is that was not an insurrection, no matter what Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the clucks at CNN want to call it. That was not an insurrection. So they brought in all of this security, 25,000 National Guard troops from all across the states. And that was the largest deployment of National Guard troops in D.C. in the entire history of America. Today I found out the Biden administration has instituted another executive order that they're going to leave 5,000 National Guard troops on the streets of DC till the end of March. Why? The thing that you said you needed them there to protect and to make sure that the people that weren't allowed there to behave is gone. There are no threats currently against the congressional building. There are no threats against any individuals at the moment.
Well, Kai, I was going to say, I think look, the truth is this: there's a huge divide still in America, and it's going nowhere. Is it? There's talk of him. There's talk of Trump setting up the Patriotic Party or something like that. Of course, 72 million, I think, people voted for him. You know, Twitter shut him down. Facebook shut him down. This censorship by these big tech companies, clearly, I'm opposed to. I think is appalling and wrong. And who knows, they might shut us down at one point if I start getting controversial, but I don't care. But the truth is, you know, these big tech companies, they're not platforms, they're publishers, because they shouldn't have the right to shut down a person's opinion. And they did that. You know, listen, Trump said some outrageous things, some mad things. I get that. But the question I've asked our viewers tonight is, do you think Biden has been good for the UK? Now, Steve on YouTube has said, here it is, Kai, Trump, for all his faults, put America first. Now, that mantra that he used during his first, obviously, his election campaign, you know, make America great or put America first, that really worked for him. Why didn't it work this time for him?
Well, I believe it did. Being a journalist, I've been privy to an awful lot of facts that the general public don't get to see. And I won't go on ranting on about them because I would just bore us all stupid. But what I've witnessed in the last 78 days has been absolutely horrendous, where you've had big tech and mainstream media deliberately quashing legitimate stories, deliberately silencing conservative voices to get a radical liberal candidate elected, deliberately targeting, and just the figures from independent audits alone that are coming out, right? The proportion of political advertisements seen by people based on their leaning, it's something like 8-1 with Facebook alone. That if you were liberal leaning, Democrat leaning, you would see more. You would see on average 8 adverts for your candidate and your party to every one that they allowed for Trump. What we've witnessed is big tech, mainstream media deliberately trying to influence the outcome of an election. Now, this is what they accused Russia and China of doing, and cried foul of all manner of illegalities. But because these are donors to the Democratic Party in some way, shape, or form, it's been allowed. And what I've seen is, and I'm fortunate because I'm also a journalist and able to say these things under the guise of free speech. What I've seen is a Democratic Party so stressed out and distraught over their hatred of a man because he doesn't fit the political narrative. And what we have now is a man in the Oval Office that is clearly demonstrated within hours of becoming president. And there's a lot to be said about whether he's legitimate or not because of the time that he was inaugurated, because for 12 minutes, we technically had 2 presidents. But what we're seeing here in Washington, D.C. is more of the same. If you are truly now, and I said this on the news on Friday when I was on talking about President Biden, if you truly are wanting to be the president that unifies a nation, that heals the soul of America, as you said in your inauguration speech, the first place you need to start is your own party, because Biden is, people forget, Biden is also the leader of the Democratic Party for the next 4 years. And if he wants to show unity, then stop the witch hunt. Deal with the rhetoric that is coming out, because what we've seen since his inauguration is Democratic congressional members, senators, and House representatives now wanting to penalize and punish anybody that supported Trump during his presidency, anybody that defended him in the sham impeachment that is going on, anybody that came up for him, and saying that senators like Ted Cruz furthered incitement of this quote-unquote insurrection by the fact that they legitimately questioned the Electoral College votes when we had exactly the same thing done by the Democrats in the last 5 elections that they have lost, is absolutely ridiculous. That if you want to be the leader of the free world and you want to show that you want to heal America, you want to heal the divide, you need to dish out some serious discipline in your own party. Tell them, as we would say in this country, you all need to wind your neck in and shut up.
Yeah. You wind your neck in. I like that phrase. Yeah, I can say it to quite a few people. Just to bring this kind of section to a close on Biden, I think the big question is now it's not going to change. Of course, we accept that he is the 46th president of the United States of America. But the question I want to ask our viewers, and of course to you as well, Kai, is do you think Biden will be good for the UK?
Personally, I don't. I don't see. I remember just after he was announced as the president-elect, when somebody from the BBC tried to get him to say a few words and said that, what did they say? President-elect Biden, I forget which journalist it was, say John MacArthur or whatever he was from the BBC. And he turned and looked at him and went, yeah, I'm Irish. That said all I needed to know right there. But Biden will not do what is in good keeping of maintaining the special relationship because he's anti where the UK is now. He's anti-Brexit. He's anti the Union. So he would be quite happy to see both Wales, Northern Ireland.
Let's be honest, he doesn't even know where Wales is, does he? Let's be honest. Joe Biden.
I genuinely believe he'd be happy to see the breakdown of the Union and try and force Britain back into the European Union.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd make no qualms about it. He's come out and said that he's in support of us being part of the European Union. He supports that project. Of course, the power, the super state called the European Union, which we voted leave, thank God, and saw sense. So Biden then, obviously, one of the things that when he got elected, I thought to myself, this man's not fit for office, not because of his policies, but because of some of the things he was saying or unable to say.
Yeah.
He wasn't coherent. He wasn't able to speak. He was saying things that didn't make any sense, and people were taking the mickey out of him. You saw it on social media. They were ripping right into him, saying the guy can't even speak. He's on a Zimmer frame. He's in his late 70s or whatever age he is. He's not fit to be a president. So do you think what some of our viewers have said to me and some of my friends have said, this was all part of a plan to get Kamala Harris to the White House as the president?
Well, make no bones about it. We're not seeing a Biden administration. You're seeing Biden at the forefront of a Harris administration. The simple fact of the matter is, just in the run-up, in the primaries and running up after she was announced as the VP, what did Biden say? If they disagree, he'll resign. Hang on, you're the president. Why are you resigning? Everybody else needs to resign if they disagree with you. And she said it multiple times in what they put down as a faux pas. And to me, it wasn't. It was the truth coming out when she talked about the Harris-Biden administration. People need to be really, really mindful of the fact, if Biden is still president 18 months from now, I will be really surprised. This is about getting Kamala Harris through the door, and this is the only way they can do it to get her through the door at the moment. Yeah. To get a truly radical liberal in power, somebody that, as Attorney General of the state of California, was absolutely devastating for her own ethnic identity. The people of her own ethnicity, she decimated.
I got to stop you. I got to laugh. I got to laugh because you talk about this radical liberal. And I got this on my Twitter account. I reposted it because it's true. When Biden was asked about transgender and about, how you identify, if you identify as a woman or a woman, Piers Morgan identified as a penguin. I suppose you can identify as anything you want. And he talked about people in prison, but before they go into incarceration, which they call it in America, he says you can identify wherever you want. And I thought, well, the women's prison is going to be full of men, because if I was going to get arrested as a bloke and they said, what sex are you? I'm going to go, I'm a woman. Send me to women's prison. I mean, it's just nuts. And these aren't made up videos. These are factual things that this man is coming out with. It's absolutely nuts.
But see, what concerns me is, that's quite a funny example, but it's very, very true. But what concerns me is bathrooms now, state bathrooms, public school bathrooms, restaurants, where little children, little young girls have to go to the toilet, are now going to be confronted by men that, for all intents and purposes, have very, very perverse natures or perverse intentions, identifying as a woman. And I'll tell you this now, you can identify as you want. You identify parts of your body to my little girl. You can identify as a
bush. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny you say that, because also this week, and this is just slightly off track, but I'll mention it. It was Michelle Le Pen, I think, the French politician. She wanted to bring some legislation into France to bring the age of consent down to 13. Yeah. 13 years of age. I went absolutely mental on Twitter, because to me, that is just pedophilia, whether you like it or not. You can dress up as you want. That is absolutely abhorrent. And yet there is this agenda being pushed through now, isn't it, in a lot of the liberal side of politics.
It's the destruction of the family. And that's the goal of see, we forget that through the years, we have been desensitized to certain things that 50, 60 years ago were major criminal offenses, to the point that we've now legislated and legalized them, and most people find it acceptable practice. We're not shocked or offended by it anymore, whereas my grandparents, or maybe even my parents, would have found it morally abhorrent and repulsive to see certain things. You see it. Name one TV program now where there isn't some form of homosexuality or reference to some form of crime, or that was horrendous and now we find acceptable. This is my concern with the liberal left, is that we desensitize. The goal is the desensitization of society to the point that anything becomes acceptable. Now, in my other function as a clergyman, I study history as well, and there was a society many, many years ago, around the time of the Roman Empire, called the Epicureans, that believed that anything went as long as it was good for your own personal pleasure. The result of that was the Epicureans are no longer around. So we're going to get to this point where I think we'll see this continual forcing of desensitization until one thing becomes the straw that breaks the camel's back, and suddenly society pushes back. And that's when you see civil war, or that's when you see civil unrest, and that's when you see hatred create further divisions, like the race divisions in America or the political divisions in America. The concern is this: all of that could have been negated and navigated away from if we just didn't take such polar opposites. And the danger of the road that they're taking is they're moving towards a socialist communist state where if you don't agree with their liberal ideology, that you will be imprisoned or worse. And it's not like, this is what people need to understand, where they draw the comparisons with the Chinese Communist Party or socialist Russia. That was authoritarian. They imposed massive restrictions on society. This new breed of socialism that they are advocating now has no restrictions. It is anything goes, and if you deny me, you become the enemy. So we're moving towards this system of absolute removal of morality from the society that we live in, and complete desensitization so that anything becomes acceptable. I mean, in the UK, they're talking about, I've seen lectures from people that defend pedophilia as a natural sexual persuasion.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. I mean, I got to jump in and say, when I hear that crap, it really makes my blood boil, because there is no, I don't care how intellectual you think you are, or scientific you think you are. Listen, there is no cause or reason to actually defend that kind of way of thinking or lifestyle. It is abhorrent, and you should be locked up the rest of your life if that's the case. Anyway, Bish, we're going to move. I know.
There's a documentary on Netflix called "All Men Are Pedophiles."
I mean, it's absolutely shocking, absolutely shocking. We're gonna move on because of the time. Now, I want to talk about, before we go tonight, to our viewers as well, I want to talk about lockdowns, because many people are watching this broadcast tonight, and to you watching on Facebook as well, thank you for tuning in on your phone, on your iPad, on your computer, whatever you're watching. I really appreciate it, and to our YouTube viewers as well. The whole idea of these lockdowns is getting very, very tiresome for people. The mental health aspect we all know about, with all the stuff that's been shut down, the economical impact is massive. Now, we get all that, but let me just try and break it down for in real terms. Now, we're homeschooling our children. A lot of parents are really struggling with that. There doesn't seem to be a light at the end of the tunnel. We were promised in December, when the vaccine was found, it was like, yes, we've got a vaccine, brilliant. I remember Matt Hancock coming on and crying, and it's great, we got a vaccine. And here in Wales as well, although in Wales we have sadly been rolling out the vaccine at a snail's pace, not as fast as we should have, which is well documented in the media. People are getting really tired. I've spoken to friends who say, look, when is this going to end? What's the way out of this lockdown? People want to know. So for those of you watching right now, this is your opportunity to share the broadcast, share the Facebook page, because we're going to talk about lockdowns and can we actually get out of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show people a graphic that really hit home to me over a statement that was made by the health minister here in Wales, Vaughan Gething. Now, for those of you who don't know Vaughan Gething, he is my friend. Vaughan Gething is the health minister for Wales. He was trained as a solicitor, and he's now responsible for health in Wales. Now, given the fact that 5 out of 7 of our health boards up until recently, Betsy Cadwaladr is out of it now, but that's another story, were in special measures. The NHS in Wales has been on its knees. It's nothing to do with Boris Johnson. It's nothing to do with Westminster. This is the Welsh government's responsibility. And our doctors and our nurses in the NHS, some of which are friends, work in the NHS, work in the Neville Hall down the road from me here, they are legends. But the handling of the pandemic, we know in Wales, has been woeful. We've had the highest number of cases in the whole of the UK at one point in the world, and that was a fact. Yep. Not me saying it, it was published. And of course, the rollout of the vaccination program has been appalling. Now, given all that, nobody knows. These reviews that we keep having, I think the next one's at the end of January, 29th of January, we don't know, when are we going to go back to bloody normal? Why can't the government get its act together, sort this out, vaccinate the elderly, get the top 4 people done first, and the NHS staff workers and teachers, so the kids go back to school, and let the bloody rest of us get on with life, because it's driving us nuts. But here's the graphic I want to show. And it's Vaughan Gething, and it says it here, doesn't it? It says lockdown to continue till at least Easter. Now, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, ladies and gentlemen, but that is something that he has not ruled out. The possibility that we could be in blooming lockdown till Easter. What do you think about that, Kai?
Well, I think it's absolutely ridiculous, and I think it's ridiculous for 2 reasons. One, from what I understand, very, very little of the medical data actually supports the whole lockdown theory anyway. And every medical professional that signed the Great Barrington Declaration, of which I have friends that have signed it, all agree that lockdown strategies don't work. The fact of the matter is the WHO, that at the start of the pandemic were pushing the lockdown narrative, then retracted it to say that the lockdowns don't work. So they clearly changed their position on it. The suicide rate because of the lockdowns in the United Kingdom is up 3,000% on the last 12 months. Goodness knows the untold damage towards mental health that this has had. I personally know people that haven't left their houses at all for months. I haven't seen my own family properly for many, many months, other than, taking food to them because not only am I a journalist and all that lot, I try and volunteer with the essential workers as much as I can. But there's no clear end in sight. And when Vaughan Gething made the announcement this week that they don't intend to, now, see, this is the difficulty. He didn't technically say Easter. What he said was the spring.
And we haven't ruled it out, you see. That's the thing.
Exactly.
He constantly uses a phrase, like with mandatory vaccinations, he said, we're not going to rule it out. He never rules things out, which means you rule them in, which gives you the option to actually say, we're not going to open anything up.
He's a good lawyer because he's very specific with his vernacular, so he's not held to account over what he didn't say or did say. But when they talk about keeping this lockdown in place until Easter, this then immediately became obvious. This is not about welfare. This is not about protecting the NHS. This is not about care for the community. This is not about the failures they've had in the vaccination program. This is about being in a position to do what he's been spouting since summer of last year, move the elections. And this has become about Welsh Labour making sure they have enough time to try and bounce back from the damage that they have done to the Welsh economy, to the Welsh people, and hope that they have enough people that will just blindly vote for Labour like they've always done for many, many years to keep them in power. The further away the election is, the more time they've got to try and recover and make amends for, this absolute abject failure. When the national government announces that nearly 6 million people in the UK have been vaccinated, of which only 212,000 were Welsh, that to me is an appalling number. I live in Pembrokeshire. Yesterday was the first day that a resident in Pembrokeshire managed to be given the first dose of the vaccination. We haven't even had a vaccination center established until Thursday of this week in Pembrokeshire. This is one of the largest counties in Wales, with one of the elderliest populations in Wales. And it is like they just do not care down in that bubble in Cardiff Bay. It's horrendous. How the man even got a job after what he did?
Yeah, true.
Breaking the regulations.
He broke regulations himself, didn't he? He broke regulations himself, didn't he? Right?
Changed the rules the day after.
But also, you have to realise as well, this is a man now, the Health Minister of Wales, who caused the biggest, under his watch, the biggest data breach in Welsh history, actually, with 18,000 letters shielding us going to the wrong addresses of people who were vulnerable last year. He failed on testing, promising 5,000 tests a day. I was in touch with the company, Roche, that were offered the Welsh government these tests. I spoke to one of their directors and they said, we've offered the Welsh government all of these tests and they didn't take them. This is the reality of what people are up against. Now, I don't want to talk about just the Welsh context, but I want to speak to our viewers who are watching about lockdowns, because there are probably people tuned in tonight who've never watched stuff like this. It's your first time. Thanks for tuning in. Share it as well, because it's important you get this information, not from mainstream media. This lockdown, has it been planned? Now, the WHO have been given advice, of course, to governments around the world, right? This global entity that says, if you remember, they said masks were no good, you don't have to wear them. Then they changed and said, no, you have to wear them. So that now there's this enforcement of masks across the world in different capacities. Now, the WHO keep changing that advice. We know they're heavily influenced by some big players such as China and many others as well. Is there something going on much bigger than just regulations and restrictions that we face on a day-to-day basis here in Wales?
Yeah, I believe so. I really do. And I'll say this.
Tell us what you think.
This week, the WHO changed their testing criteria for the PCR test. We have been given statistics day after day after day for almost, well, just over 10 months now. And it's only the last few months that underneath those statistics that we see, that anybody can read on the daily news, you see this died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. The WHO this week changed their criteria for the PCR test. These are the things that keep giving us these astronomical daily figures of how many new cases of COVID-19 there are. And the reason they've done it is they've said because their current methodology of testing is producing far too many false positives. On average, 40% of PCR tests, based on what the WHO have published this week, so the censors that are listening get it right. I'm not making this stuff up. This is directly from the WHO themselves, that approximately 40% of positive test results are a false positive. So what we are seeing is, to me, an agenda that is in some way, shape, or form moving towards a globalist movement. And I'm not talking about conspiracy theory. I'm just looking at the facts of what's going on and how you can keep using data that is constantly changed, but is not constantly changed based on the actual medical data coming out of hospitals, coming out of doctors' practices. In Wales alone, well, in the United Kingdom, they're currently using WHO data in their decision-making plans and strategy for dealing with the pandemic. And everybody is, well, let me not say everybody.
And can I say, and this, Kai, is based on predictions. So the WHO come up with a forecast. So this is like, we forecast this is going to happen. So therefore, we need to do A, B, and C. Yeah. Now, a lot of our viewers here tonight, on Facebook, will know this, right? And it's kind of misleading on the data. When they report the figures, I've looked at an Iron Bevan, and which is the health board that is around here, and of course others as well within Wales, and they report the deaths, but it always has a caveat at the bottom, the small print. We always used to say
28 days of a COVID test.
Yeah, they've died within 20 days of being testing positive of a COVID test. Now, the truth is, it doesn't state that they actually died of COVID. Now, we know people have. I've got friends and loved ones who've got family members who have, okay? So that's the reality. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this misrepresentation of the data that presents a kind of picture that isn't entirely true, is it?
Well, I had some information given to me for doing the news in the US concerning the UK, right? And I've not been able to find it in the UK, but we certainly got it from a US news source. And that was talking about the multiple morbidity of COVID-19, because people forget it's a multiple morbidity virus. If they remove the multiple morbidity aspect, now this is a couple of weeks ago, so I don't know what the current statistics would be today, or the current figures would be as of right now when we're broadcasting, but literally 3 or 4 weeks ago, when I got that information, and this is information being given through the CDC in America. When they remove the multiple morbidity aspect of COVID, that's talking about pneumonia, breathing complications, stuff like that COVID has brought on. The number of people in the United Kingdom, this was middle of December, that had actually died from the virus alone was just under 4,000 people, not the 90-something thousand people that we're currently reporting. I know people that have died. My neighbor died a couple of weeks ago, and his death was put down as a COVID test, COVID related. He died about 26 days after a positive COVID-19 test. He had a very, very advanced cancer. That was the reason that he died, but it's still reported as a COVID-related death, which is so misleading to the general public. It's untrue. And it also gives the government the ability to basically, stuff the figures to make it look however they want to live. The simple fact of the matter is, if you have COVID, then you should be monitored. And if you unfortunately lose your battle for life to that virus, the real reason, because most people that are dying from asphyxia in hospital are not dying because of COVID. They're dying from the pneumonia caused by the COVID, but it doesn't get reported as pneumonia. If we believe the medical statistics, again, for the census, stuff that I'm reading from the WHO, from Public Health England, Public Health Wales, if we believe that, influenza, pneumonia have all but disappeared in the last 10 months. So clearly the picture that we're getting is not a true and accurate description of what really is going on, which means to me, if you constantly promote this data, constantly promote these things, you are trying to deliberately mislead the public based on what you're promoting. And this, just listening to the adverts about, if you don't take the vaccine now, somebody that could die. If that's not Project Fear, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's been a big part of it. I just want to say, before we get to the ultimate of what I'm going to talk about on lockdowns, because I want to, what is the way out? How do we get back to some kind of normality? I want to remind all of our viewers just of a project that we've got doing here in Rich Politics to buy better studio equipment so we can bring these, and it's a free broadcast I bring to you every single week on Rich Politics on YouTube and of course here on Facebook. But more importantly, we're trying to upgrade. We've got some studio space given for free by a good friend of mine, which I'm moving into this year. But if you can support the project, all you got to do is the link that's just on the screen there, coffee.com Rich Politics, and all you have to do is buy me a cup of coffee. Let me know you've bought it. I'll send you a message where I'll say thank you. I like it strong, shaken and not stirred. But yeah, buy us a coffee, £3, make a donation. I'd really appreciate it. It's in the bio as well. But I want to talk come to the ultimate thing really. Is there any light at the end of the tunnel? How in God's green earth can we actually get back to normal? And when do you think it's going to happen? Or do you think that politicians and people in places of power are deliberately keeping us in this situation for their own gain, whatever that might be? What is the answer here? I'm asking, I know you can't give me the answer. It's $1 million question, right? I know, right? Because if I had it, I'd package it and I'd sell it.
It'd be on eBay, I can tell you.
Straight away, right? But what do you think is the answer? Now, I was all for this herd immunity, right? At the start of the conversation, it was about herd immunity, protect the elderly. And I'm going to come up with some questions because there's some people who bring their comments up. Stefan, good friend of mine and yours, fear controls. There's a control element going on. Governments do control, of course, the narrative and everything else. Steve Roberts, my good friend in Ebbw Vale, and Diane as well, Diane Roberts, he said this year, why are they misleading the public? Now, in fact, I'm going to ask you that question. Why do you think they are, with this data, and none of us are denying COVID. None of us are saying the vaccine is, a chip in your hand. We all, we get it. We're normal thinking people. We're not extremist and conspiracy mad, right? But good question.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. Why are they misleading the public?
Because of what they can achieve under emergency measures. This is all about a political agenda. If you don't believe me, you tell me which news source reported this week that the government in England changed the lockdown restrictions to extend it to the 17th of July, because it wasn't on the media. The misleading of the public, the Project Fear, is about what can be achieved under emergency powers, under emergency legislation. In Wales, was changing the voting age from 18 to 16 necessary? Could that not have waited until after the pandemic, yet Welsh Labour pushed it through under the emergency powers legislation? That's not a national interest. I mean, yes, it's in the national interest of people living in Wales.
And I may say foreign nationals as well.
People forget they tried to get the vote for prisoners serving 4 years or less. At the same time.
The whole issue with foreign nationals, I find interesting. And just aside here, when Arlene Davies called out Mark Reckless, one of our members in the Senate, he says, you're a visitor here. Well, actually, yeah, but so are all the foreign nationals then. And they, Arlene, and
he'd be quite happy for them to vote for him when it comes. Exactly. I don't think anybody else in Blaenau Gwent would have common sense.
Hopefully my friends in Abertillery and Bryn Mawr and Blaenau, I'm naming all the places now, Ebbw Vale, Tredegar, all across Blaenau Gwent will realise, listen, a vote for Arlene Davies is a waste of time. Vote for Richard Taylor. If I stand, I haven't decided yet. I haven't made it public. But anyway, let's get back to business. Why are they misleading the public? Why? Why would they?
Because of what they can achieve. This is what we've got to remember is the world as we know it. This thing that we now define the world by pre and post COVID. That's how quickly this virus, which I'm not denying the virus isn't real. Yes, it is real. I know people that have had the virus, but the long-term plan around what's going to happen out of this is this moves us closer towards the globalist agenda. Just look at what's happening with the World Economic Forum, things that the European Union are talking about, things that Biden's administration are talking about. They can't achieve that when the public has the ability to put a stop to it. So what you do is you remove civil liberties. And like we talked about with the previous issue with Biden's administration, what do we people are fed up of the lockdowns as we know it now, but we're also becoming more tolerant of it because we've been in it so long. This showed me how quickly governments can shut a country down and the people do nothing about it. They just lay down and accept it. Now, what we've got to get to as a public is a place where we go, okay, enough is enough. You represent us. And 630 people in Westminster, 650 people in Westminster, and 60 people in Cardiff Bay are not going to dictate the life and the lifestyle of 50 plus million people, because that's what's happening right now.
Because I think, you know, I've heard a lot of people talk about civil unrest, and that if this continues, and I'm not advocating it, so, you know, because I don't want to be liable for anything, but, you know, there's going to be some serious consequences, and I'm talking about people out on the streets and saying we've had enough of this. Not just protests. I'm talking about en masse. I'm talking about populations of people rising up, as we've seen across different parts of the world and in Europe, where people said we will not accept this. The thing is with us Brits, right? We just take it up the behind, don't we? We just go, oh well, you know, okay, so whatever will be. But I think we're getting to the point now where members of the public are saying, I've had an absolute titful, and I've had enough, and I can't take this anymore. This is not, we cannot go on like this. There's got to be a light at the end of the tunnel. Surely people are going to get to the point where they're going to say, that's enough. We're done with voting. We're done with politicians. We're done with rules. We're done with restrictions. I've had enough. I am not bringing up my children in a world where we're constantly under lockdown, civil liberties being taken away. It's time now for the people to rise up, to stand up to these governments and say enough is enough.
Well, look, the irony is, the answer to what you're asking lies in Donald Trump's inauguration speech. Why did Trump become the president? Why did he have the effect he did? Because he tapped into a populist mood, created a populist movement, and in his inaugural speech said, this is the day we take power from Washington and give it back to you, the people. And this is what the elite in Washington hated, was the fact that he didn't want them to be in control anymore. What we have got to get to in Great Britain is a point where we go, enough is enough. Because we don't want career politicians. Don't go to university, study politics, and try and get elected. See, if I was prime minister, you would have to be at least 45 to be eligible to run for political office, because you need life experience. I wouldn't look for people that haven't had management experience or run their own businesses.
Well, life experience, isn't it? Let's be honest. Exactly. You want a politician to represent you who know what life is about, not people who have been, you know, they just don't get it. I agree with that. Listen, Kai, our time's almost up, and I know the viewers want to hear more. We're going to do it again. Hey, folks, listen, we're going to be back on Sunday night next week. In fact, Kai, are you okay? Are you free next Sunday?
I think I am. If I'm not, I'll let you know.
We're going to do it next Sunday because, you know, I've really enjoyed this. We're going to talk on topical issues. This is Rich Politics, a non-politically correct weekly broadcast. We've been on air for over an hour, so I just want to bring things to a conclusion in a roundabout way. But before I do, I just want to mention a couple of things to our viewers. Please don't forget, if you want to support what I'm doing here in bringing you all the news and everything else that's an alternative for mainstream media, all you got to do is go to coffee.com/Rich Politics. Buy me a coffee for £3. Bish, can you tell our people or the viewers tonight why they should support Rich Politics?
Yes, because right now we need real people telling the real story to get real results. The time of professional politicians and false promises is over. Power lies in our hands if we reach out and take it. And we need people like Rich that give a straight, unbiased, unselfish, truthful breakdown of what is going on, what we can expect, and really, you know, Rich is one of these men that I know that is not in this for the money, not in this for the fame, but is in this because he cares about the people that he speaks to. He cares about the people that he brings this information to. And the fact of the matter is, as one of my nearest and dearest would say, Richard is not afraid to tell it like it is. And it's about time we had people that were not afraid to simply say what needs to be said.
That's so kind of you, Kai. I really appreciate it. To all of our viewers as well, and my friends all across Wales, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I really appreciate it. And don't forget to follow us on all the social media outlets like YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And we will be back probably the same time next week here on Rich Politics. We'll give you plenty of notice. Make sure you share the broadcast so people can watch it back as well. Appreciate you. Love you. God bless you all. Catch you again next week on Rich Politics.